So you've had a great discovery call with an ideal client. The person you're speaking to, they get it, they're engaged, they're nodding, and then they say something like, oh, this looks really interesting. And then nothing happens. No decision, no next step. Weeks go by and you can't get them back on the phone. The reason why is because the person you're talking to, they can't say yes. They can only say, oh, let me pass this up to someone else. You're not speaking to the economic buyer. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to fix that, how to get in front of the person in the organization that has the willingness and the power to buy what you're selling. And this is the number one challenge that I hear from founders selling into large organizations or even medium-sized organizations. I can't get in front of the main person that I want to sell to that buys my product. They might have a great conversation with the influencer, but that person either doesn't want to or doesn't have the influence to get the economic buyer involved. So your deal just dies a slow, slow death. So here's what's actually happening when you're trying to reach the economic buyer, but you can't. You're selling below the noise. So in John McMahon's famous book, The Qualified Sales Leader, there's a story in this that brings this whole thing to life. So there's a sales rep called Shannon in this book, and she's meeting with the CIO and the CSO of this large organization, right, that she wants to sell to. And she asked the CIO a very simple question. There are lots of vendors that are trying to get on your radar, that are trying to sell you different products and solutions. How do you make sense of which ones are trying to sell to you and which ones you can ignore and which ones you pay attention to? And his answer was really interesting. He said, look, we've got hundreds of issues in our organization, but the vendors who can focus on solving the biggest problems that we have in our company, those are the ones that get our business. And then he said something even more interesting. He said, most people think I'm a firefighter. I'm actually a forest ranger. And what that means is that some fires will burn. I just let them burn. I just focus on extinguishing and putting out the most threatening ones that threaten our whole organization. So ultimately, that's your competition. It's not your direct competitor down the road. It's that. It's the noise, right? There are hundreds of these smaller fires that the economic buyer is already ignoring in their business. And if you don't package your offer properly, if you don't package it in the right way, you'll just be seen as a small fire. And that's the reason why you won't get the economic buyer to meet with you in the first place. So I remember I was selling compliance software to this large US maintenance company. And it was clear that if the company used our software, the client would run their business so much more efficiently. They'd be so much more productive. Their people would be more productive and happier. It was clear because we had the experience and the testimonials to prove it. The issue was we didn't tie our solution back to the largest fires that the economic buyer actually cared about, which were revenue, profitability, and risk. The issue was that this wasn't a big enough fire, or we didn't make them see it was a big enough fire, because the main thing on the economic buyer's mind at that time was this big digital transformation project that they were currently going through. And that took up so much of their bandwidth, their time, and their attention that the value that we could obviously deliver, it was so far down on their priority lists, it just wasn't important. So it's not to say that obviously it would never be a priority, but currently they were dealing with this really big fire and we were just a small fire, or one that they could afford to ignore at the time. So we ended up having 2 meetings with the economic buyer, showing a clear and compelling business case. But because our solution didn't address the biggest pain that they were experiencing right now, we didn't get his attention. And in the meetings, he was like unengaged. He delegated it to some junior people in his team. And as a result, the deal just died a really slow death. And it was painful. So if you're selling a mid-level pain to a mid-level person, you're just seen as a small fire and they'll just let you burn. So how do you get above the noise and to the economic buyer? 3 things. Number 1, you got to speak the language of the C-suite. At the highest level of any organization, business pain connects to 3 things: revenue, profitability, and risk. It's not about streamlining workflows. It's not about improving team efficiency. It's not about better reporting or whatever it is that you do. Unless you can connect your solution to one of those 3 things and then quantify the impact in terms of money or a financial case, you don't have a C-level conversation. You just got a middle management conversation. So ask yourself, how does the problem that I solve show up in the P&L? How does that show up in board meetings? And when you answer that question, that's what you'll lead with when you're speaking to the economic buyer. Number 2 is stop starting in the wrong room. Most reps kind of default to whoever will just take the meeting with them. You know, the IT manager, the ops lead, the head of marketing, you know, whoever it is. And look, those conversations are obviously very valuable and really important, but only if you can treat them as a route to actually getting to the economic buyer. When you're in that first meeting, your whole goal is to get a referral up to the economic buyer. So here's how you do it. You do that by uncovering pain at their level and then quantify it. And then you say something like, look, based on what you've told me, Mr. Customer, that sounds like this is kind of hitting the wider business. There are other business functions that are involved here. Would it make sense to involve the CFO, the CEO, the CRO in a follow-up conversation so that we can look at how this impacts the wider organization? So you're not going around them, and obviously people hate that, the fact that you're going around them or over their heads. You're actually bringing them with you. By the way, if they say no and they don't want to get the CEO involved, they don't want to get the CFO involved, just ask them why, and then ask them, well, what does make sense? You know, what do they feel comfortable doing as a next step? And if they still don't want to do that, if they still don't want to get you in front of the economic buyer, then one of three things are happening. Either A, you haven't proven that this is a big enough problem and a pain, so you haven't proven that this is above the noise. B, they don't believe that your company and you can deliver on what you're saying, which is a larger issue. And then C, it could be that the person is just way too junior, they're way too scared to involve their bosses, in which case you just need to go and find somebody else. Point 3 is lead with the fire, not the noise. In your cold outreach, in your emails, and your LinkedIn messages, they need to name that fire. You know, don't talk about your product, don't talk about your process, talk about the fire that's enraging and has the potential to engulf the whole forest, right? So what's the specific business problem that keeps the economic buyer up at night? So for the compliance company that I talked about earlier, the economic buyer in that situation understood that, look, we can have an impact on their profitability and reduce their costs and improve their efficiency, but we didn't quantify the impact that we can have on their business in pounds and pence. So he couldn't look at it on paper and go, is this above the noise or not? And as a result, we just couldn't get the real attention of the economic buyer. So when your outreach actually names the fire, not a generic pain, not your solution, the fire that has the potential to burn down the forest, you know, because you do that, then you get their attention. And because it sounds like you actually understand their world and the environment that they're operating in. So here's how you need to think about it. You're not selling a product or a solution. You're helping a senior executive put out a fire that's potentially threatening their whole company. And when you internalize that, your messaging changes, your targeting changes, your confidence on these discovery calls completely changes. You stop chasing the wrong person who will just take the meeting, and you start pursuing the person that actually feels the fire and wants to put out that fire. So as McMahon says in this book brilliantly, customers bought for small dollars for the few small pains that we discovered. Small pains means small deals, means small access. Big pains, the ones that are tied to revenue, profitability, and risk, that's where the economic buyer lives. And that's where the big decisions get made. And that's where you need to operate. Okay, so let's recap. To get to the economic buyer, 1, you have to connect your solution to revenue, profitability, and risk. That's the only language that actually lands and has impact on the economic buyer. Number 2, you got to use your champion to get access to the economic buyer, not as a gatekeeper, as a guide. Use them to bring in the economic buyer. Don't go over their heads. They hate that. Number 3, lead with their fire in every piece of your outreach. So name it specifically. Make them feel like you understand the fire that has the potential to burn down the whole forest. If you do these things consistently, you won't be chasing the economic buyer anymore. You'll have their time and you'll have their attention. If this was useful, subscribe to the channel. Every week I share practical sales and outbound strategy advice for founder-led tech companies where the founder is the rainmaker between 1 to 10 million ARR. What's your biggest challenge when you're trying to reach the economic buyer? Leave your comments below.